Hello everyone, my name is Kevin P. McAuliffe, and welcome to Lowepost.com's Fairlight Fundamentals course. Much like our Fusion Fundamentals course, this course is designed to get you up and running with Fairlight inside of DaVinci Resolve by giving you the knowledge you need to take your audio mix from start to finish. Our course is going to cover everything from getting started and project organization in this course to tracks versus buses, recording ADR and Scratch VO tracks, mixing, automation, Fairlight effects including EQ and pitch shift, as well as understanding loudness and knowing your deliverables. Now, to get started in our first lesson, it's important to talk about organizing yourself before you get started, because working with audio is not the same as working with video, and an unorganized project leads to hours and hours of extra work that a little bit of organization right off the bat would have prevented. Okay. Let's get started, and I want to start out by talking about organization before the mix. Alright, so let's Command or Alt and Tab into DaVinci Resolve, and as you can see, I've jokingly called this project a disaster project. Now, the reason that I've called it a disaster project is because I've laid it out in the way that many editors will lay a project out. Now, you'll see that over in my bin, I have a whole ton of audio clips just simply called A01, 1507, etc., etc. Now, the reason that I've done this is to simulate what happens when you shoot with a camera that shoots onto cards. It's not like in the day when we used to record onto VTRs when we would digitize all the shots on a tape. Ideally, we would name those shots exactly what the shot was. So, for example, with this shot here, it's car driving through desert on a hot day. In this case, you can see I have no idea what this audio clip is. It's simply just called A01. So in my timeline here, if no one actually tells me what is on what track, I'm going to have to listen to each clip to figure out what's what. And that's really not the way that you want to work. And to be honest, that's not the way I'm going to work in this course. I actually have a timeline that's super organized that we're going to be working with, but I want to show you how we're going to get from here to there. Now, what was interesting when I sat down to start coming up with the concept for this course was I have to look at it from 2 points of view. One is the point of view of the editor editing inside of Resolve. The other is from the point of you as the editor in Resolve taking a project from an offline in a media composer, for example, bringing that timeline into Resolve, and then having to deal with the audio that's been given to you by the editor doing the offline. Now, as an online editor, and in our case, as the person who's going to be doing the mix, you are going to dictate the workflow. You're going to dictate the path that's going to be taken by the offline editor. You're going to lay everything out the way that you want. They will conform to that so that this way, when it appears inside of your Resolve timeline, you can get yourself organized lightning quick. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to switch over to Media Composer. I'm going to show you organization there and what happens when you move that project from there to here. So let's Command or Alt and Tab into Avid Media Composer. Now, as you can see from my timeline, it looks very different. I mean, it looks the same from a standpoint of there's clips in the timeline. They actually match the clips that are over in Resolve. However, it's very organized. You'll see we have color coding on each track, as well as each clip is actually named, as well as the track being named over here. There's absolutely zero confusion as to what is going on any of these tracks or with any of these clips for that matter. You'll see on track 1 is my voiceover. Tracks 2 and 3 is my on-camera dialogue. Tracks 4 and 5 is music. And then 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 represent our sound effects. Now, we've also color-coded them. So to be honest, even if you don't look over at the left at our track breakdown, you know exactly what's going on and what is different by simply looking at the timeline. Now, let's talk about the layout of your timeline. Now, all I'm going to do is give you a guide. To be honest, you can follow it, you don't need to follow it. The reason that I follow this layout when dealing with audio is that I've been editing for pretty close to 20 years, and I actually was part of the team that did the first Avid to Pro Tools and back again. The audio engineer laid out exactly how we had to give him our audio track so that he knew exactly where everything should be when we were attempting to do this process. And to be honest, it hasn't failed me, so I'm not going to stop working with it now. So, how you're going to lay your tracks out. There's only going to be 4 different types of tracks. There's going to be a voiceover track, an on-camera dialogue track, a music track, and a sound effect track. Now, you might be thinking, well, Kev, you've got 5 sound effect tracks, and that's true. But if you think about it, at its most basic, there's only actually 4 types of audio that you're going to be working with inside your project. There's going to be voiceover, on-camera dialogue, so something that came from a camera that was actually shot on location, music tracks, or sound effects. Sound effects, again, could come canned from a sound effects library, or they could come live from the field. Now, you might decide in your project you need 2 voiceover tracks and 1 track of everything else. No problem. Now you're going to have tracks 1 and 2 as voiceover, 3 as on-camera dialogue, 4 as music, 5 as sound effects. Then if you need to add in, for example, a music track, you're going to bump all the tracks down below that to add the music track in. So as you can see right now, this is essentially the layout that I've come up with here inside of Media Composer. Now, with that being said, what happens when we take this timeline? I say, oh, fantastic, my offline's done. I'm now going to send it over to Resolve, and I'm just going to forget about it. I'm going to let that editor deal with it. What you are actually seeing inside of Resolve is the exact transfer over from Media Composer. You'll see none of that information transferred over. I don't have anything here. So what I would expect to get from the editor working on Media Composer was a little email saying, oh, hey, Kev, by the way, track 1 is voiceover, tracks 2 and 3 is on-camera dialogue, tracks 4 and 5 is music, then tracks 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 are sound effects. So this way I can now get in and organize myself. So how am I going to do that very quickly right off the bat? It's very simple. First thing we're going to do is we're going to get in and we're going to change the track color of these tracks. So voiceover, as we remember from Media Composer, is orange. Now keep in mind, these colors could be really any color you want them to be, as long as you stick with it through the entire process, and then for every project working down the line. Now let's go on to music, which is going to be green. Now, how do I know that this is my music track? Well, I know that the music track is stereo, and you'll see these tracks here, 1.0, mono, mono, stereo, stereo. And then my sound effects tracks, because they were recorded in the field, are actually only mono. So it's actually a very quick way for me to tell exactly what is going on with each one of these tracks. So let me just get in here, pop the pink in, and you can actually already start to see right away how we can get in and organize our tracks very visually, so that every time we step into a project, if we have things done the same way, we can easily see exactly what is what, literally just by looking at the timeline. Now, if we want to take this one step further, what we now have the ability to do is just to pull this track down, and I'm going to call this not audio 1, but voiceover. Okay, I can call track 2 OCD, standing for on-camera dialogue, and I believe the first one is Johnson. Track 3 is on-camera dialogue, Dave, etc., etc. Now, I'm not going to go through all this because I actually already have a project set up, laid out exactly the way that we want. But you can see now how, if you dictate the workflow, not only inside of Resolve, but for editors that are going to be sending you timelines, this is a very simple way now to get in and organize yourself in a matter of minutes, as opposed to taking hours attempting to figure out what's what. So let's switch over to that project. I'm going to come up to File. I'm going to come down to the Project Manager. Let's just open our Fairlight project. You'll see now I've got things laid out exactly as I want them laid out. You'll see I've come in here, and instead of getting in and actually naming each track, well, actually I did get in and name each track, but what I've done just to take this to the next level, assuming that I edited this inside of Resolve, is I've gotten in and named each clip exactly what I need them to be named. So for example, this is Paul's voiceover. That's the actual track of music that I used. You'll see with our on-camera dialogue, there's Johnson and Dave, so I know exactly who is speaking at any given time. And this is now super organized. So let's jump into the Fairlight interface to see what looks different once we get there, as opposed to what we see in our timeline now. So all we're going to do is we're going to navigate right down here to the Fairlight icon, and I'm simply going to click on it. Now, the first thing for me to draw your attention to right away is the fact that we actually now have 2 zooms as opposed to 1. You'll see if I come back to the edit timeline, I can zoom in and zoom out. Pretty cool. Okay. And if I want to take a look at one of the tracks a little bit bigger, I can simply grab that track and just drag it out like such. Okay. Well, inside of Fairlight, we actually have 2 zooms, like I just mentioned. You'll see that what we can do is we can zoom in and zoom out of the timeline, but what we can also now do is exceptionally widen or shrink down these audio tracks as big or as small as we need them. Now, of course, much like we had inside of our edit timeline, we do have our timeline view options where we can get in and not only set zoom presets, but to set our timeline and our audio view options as well. Now, One other thing that I want to draw your attention to is the fact that you'll notice that when we're in our edit timeline, when we're dealing with stereo tracks, remember 2.0 represents stereo, the stereo clip is one clip that actually contains two tracks, the left track and the right track. Well, once we step into Fairlight, we can now actually see that one music track, which has been named MX, represented by the two containing channels, the left channel and the right channel, that make up that file. Okay? Now, we have run into a big problem. And the problem that we've run into is that we're now back to not knowing what these clips actually represent. Now, it's not necessarily a big deal for music, but when it comes to, for example, sound effects, ideally I'd like to know what the sound effects actually are by being able to look at them so I get a quick idea of what exactly is laid out and where it's laid out to on my timeline. Now, you'll notice that what these clips now represent is the original file name of the clip, which is not what I want to see. What I want to get in and see is what I've named the clip after that. So what we're actually going to do is navigate up to the Fairlight dropdown. I'm going to come down to the View Clip Info display. And the very first parameter we have is what do we want to view, the file name or the clip name? I'm going to select the clip name. I'm going to say OK. And you'll now see that Fairlight has switched everything back over to the actual name that I gave the clip. So again, we're right back to where we started as far as organization goes, so we can easily see what clip is what, so that we can get started with our mix. All right, I think that's a good place to leave off for this lesson. Now, keep in mind, you do have access to this project as well as the associated media, so you don't need to worry about getting in and organizing everything. Your project's going to look exactly like this once you download, unzip, and open it inside of DaVinci Resolve. And keep in mind that we value your feedback. If you have any questions or comments, please head on over and post them in our forums at lowepost.com/forums. This has been Kevin P. McAuliffe. Thanks a lot for watching.